My name is Lori Grace, and I'm the founder of the Grace Institute for Democracy and Election Integrity, and I want to say how happy I am to have all of you here caring about our elections and caring about our democracy. And before introducing everybody else, I just wanted to say a word about myself. I got involved initially in 2003 when I saw a film that had been done about the year 2000 election and by a man named Bob Greenwald, which talked about this purging that happened in Florida with a company named Choice Point, and where they had purged a lot of names of prisoners off the list. And as you all probably know, Florida was the key state in the year 2000, and I became aware with the electronic voting machines how much could be done electronically to change our votes in ways that I wouldn't like to see and would not be honest. And then I had a computer-oriented boyfriend who handed me this email about this website of Bev Harris of Black Box Voting that had been hit by Diebold because Diebold had put its entire operating instructions on an international file server, and it was picked up by in New Zealand by Scoop New Zealand, and then my boyfriend of the time downloaded it on our computer. And so I had the whole operating system for the GEMS election right on my computer. And if I had known the IP address and the password, which I later learned was 1111 and still is, I could have made some changes. But the thing that really horrified me was that this could be accessed by anybody, you know, who had been downloading this. I have since remained involved with election integrity issues because in '04 I was involved with Audit the Vote and Verified Voting and Voter Action and Vote Trust USA and a whole variety of different organizations because I was involved in the Ohio recount, helped with the New Hampshire and New Mexico recount, and unfortunately Kerry wasn't really interested in looking further at what had happened. In '05 and '06, I was also involved with Bob Fitzrakis and Harvey Wasserman, who wrote things up in something called the freepress.org. And it was my information presented on Capitol Hill in January 2005 that convinced Barbara Boxer and Stephanie Tubbs Jones, I had created the connection for them, to stand up and talk about the election, which was the first time that anything ever had gotten on C-SPAN. Now, and I don't know if any of you remember Barbara Boxer speaking about it, but it was the first time in 200 years that a senator had protested the election. And so then after that, I started getting involved with looking at whistleblowers, including a man named Clint Curtis, who had been propositioned by Congressman Tom Feeney in Florida to design a vote flipping system, which he thought was designed to unflip the Democratic flip. And he backed off from this, and as whistleblowers went, ended up having a life of a lot of pain and suffering, as unfortunately happens to American whistleblowers. But he's okay now. He in fact tried to run for office here in California, but he didn't succeed. But he's become a lawyer because he didn't have money for his own defense, and he also lost his dog, which was shot by someone who was very precious to him, you know, directly after the whole thing. And he testified with John Conyers in Ohio. So I was involved with them, and then I was involved, I started making connections between a very major whistleblower and security expert named Stephen Spoonamore. who was very high up in the Republican Party, and I don't know why these connections came to me, but I connected him with an activist named Brett Kimberlin of Black Box, Velvet Revolution US, or now it's called protectourElections.org. And we were actually involved behind the scenes with Stephen Spoonermore worked with the McCain campaign until March 2008, at which time he left because he felt it was overly dominated by religious enthusiasts. And he let us know that there was rigging already set in place. And I was involved with creating the stops through a lawsuit in Ohio, helping people, and I was always behind the scenes. But so this was important, and we were able, by getting Karl Rove's henchmen in court, to dissuade Karl Rove from keeping the mechanisms that he had in place to alter the results of the election. I've talked about this at other times, but I've been needing to be very careful, and I make sure I'm not close to Washington, D.C. when I talk about this sort of thing. Because one of the things that happened is, in trying to get this out to the media, these different things that happened, what I observed was there was a lot of fear about losing their advertisers should they bring up things like this. And even when we talked to the campaign director of Obama about what was going on, I'm trying to remember, Axelrod. He was concerned about discouraging voters, and I might add, discouraging campaign contributions. Anyway, beyond that, what I began to see is that there was a kind of an elephant in the room called possible election error or election fraud even, that really needed to be looked at. Additionally, I paid for a study of exit poll differences in California in 2008, and there were major exit poll differences on Proposition 8 and Proposition 1A, which if one were to extrapolate, and this was with Steve Freeman of the University of Pennsylvania of Election Integrity, a nonprofit, we could extrapolate that there may have been up to 1,500,000 votes added and to Proposition 8 and 1,200,000 votes added to Proposition 1A, which was the train from LA to San Jose, which I happened to vote for, but I wanted to vote for it honestly and see it win honestly. So anyway, one of the things that also I've become empathic with how difficult it is at times to become an election official, to manage all these complicated things, and even as a Secretary of State, you don't really want to, you want to look like you did well because you really like to win the next election, you know. And so I began to see that the whole system was set up to avoid looking at the elephant in the room. So I had this bright idea one day, which was, how about acknowledging the people, especially the election officials, that are willing to look at the elephant in the room, possibly, you know? And I had already known about Diebold in so many different ways that I didn't trust. That, and I had seen so many people scared and lacking confidence in our elections, but not knowing what to do or where to go. So I decided I really wanted to find out and give an award to an election official who had done something for transparency and election integrity. And lo and behold, through Eva Waskell over there, I met and learned about Carolyn Crnich and Mitch Trachtenberg and what they did. And the things that I really liked about it was, number one, it was very community-minded. Number two, it was run through, and it's sort of a nonprofit kind of structure as opposed to a for-profit corporation. Because I had seen Diebold and ES&S and all of them, you know, say, get out of here. this is proprietary, this is results with our, affects our profits. And so I really wanted to see something on a nonprofit structure. So anyway, Threshold Foundation, and we have an election integrity funding circle, and we give money regularly to election integrity situations, decided to give me a matching grant for my own nonprofit. And so that's the result of this. And so that's how this got created, and I want you to know we intend to continue further and further, year in, year out. Persistence is the name of the game in this particular topic. And to look for, election officials and eventually, and moving into secretaries of state that make outstanding contributions to the area of election transparency and election integrity, and all the different parts that creates. And we will, the current winners were reviewed by a committee composed of Eva Waskell of the Marin chapter of the League of Women Voters, Beverly Bean, and myself, I'm a member of the League, Beverly Bean of Monterey County, and Chandra Friesfam, who's coming, I guess, at 7:30, of the San Francisco chapter. So I just wanted you to know it was all carefully done, and I'm very happy, as I said, to have you here. So I wanted to say that we have some people, Carolyn there, who first got involved, well, you were first a recorder in 1990 and then moved into being a county clerk in 1996. And in 2005, she became a registrar of voters and was approached by Kevin Collins and Dave Bitts, as I understand it, who expressed some concern about a Diebold system. And she will talk to you about that a little bit later. And Mitch Trachtenberg also approached her with a system that was going to help record votes and do 2 countings, and an open counting and using open source so people could see the ballots and review it. And I was impressed by the relative low cost of the whole thing, the sense of community mindedness, and there's the relative simplicity and the nonprofit structure. And I tell you, we have so many people who, and I see so many young people especially, who don't believe in the truth of our elections, and some that don't even vote for it. And I really want to re-inspire people with trust. And this is something that Carolyn will talk about. So at this point, Eva Waskell is over there on my left, and this is Tom Stanionis, our other award winner, and Freddie Oakley, he's representing from Yolo County. And then we have 2 surprise people on either side of me, Bev Harris of Black Box Voting, and Eric Lazarus of Accurate, and of, what else?
Good enough.
Was it Stanford University? And, well, I guess I could, well, I mentioned Black Box Voting, but I've worked with Bev for off and on extensively in 2004 when I was involved in the funding of Hacking Democracy, the film on HBO. And then with respect to Eric, I've met recently, and we've really hit it off together, and he's written the book Machinery of Democracy, Protecting Elections in an Electronic World, and has worked with Stanford and with the University of Iowa, and also the book was published by the Brennan Center for Justice, which is also NYU. And he is a consultant for Stanford University currently and the Accurate Project. And so this is great because Eric is part of the mainstream group, and Bev has been more the activist group. And so I look forward to a meeting of the minds and hearts, because what we all care about is a democracy we can trust. And so further, Carolyn, I'm introduced earlier, and then there's Mitch. And I want to turn it over to Mitch and Carolyn at this point. before we go. And remember, you have to turn it on green. That's the plan.
Oh, okay. I'll arrange myself to fit the microphone here. First, let me say that this is a project that's been important to me for since I first met Kevin Collins, who will be joining us later. He's the one that came to me and said, you know, about a week after the duties of Registrar of Voters were added to those county recorder and county clerk, they came to me as citizens. They're not public officials. They're, in fact, both commercial fishermen who voiced their concern over the integrity of the equipment that we were using and elections in general, and thought that the best place to start was with a local official, and I happen to be the elected registrar of, well, I was the elected official who had recently taken on the duties of Registrar of Voters. And so as they were my constituents, I listened to what they had to say, and being somewhat naive about all of the comings and goings of elections, I guess I had a pretty open mind about it. We have been involved in finding, I mean, it was more than a couple of years, I think, of discussions with Kevin, not only suggesting that there was a problem, but also trying to help me identify a solution. Don't just tell me what's wrong. I know there's something wrong. Help me fix it. And so together, I remember Kevin suggesting that, well, how about if we just stand there with a video camera as the ballots are being fed into the machine? And I said, well, first of all, that could work halfway at central count, but you're only going to get the stuff on one side. And from that, we kind of stewed about, and you're only going to get the ones that are counted at central count in Humboldt County. That's just the absentee ballots. Because we use optical scan devices at the precincts. Those were Diebold AccuVotes. So it didn't seem like there was any way that we could make this transparent without making those ballots available to everybody to count. And that is the heart of the transparency project. The huge element that Mitch added to that was an open source method of reviewing those ballots, counting them. And when I realized that, I had an epiphany when shortly after Mitch first started working on okay, how are we going to scan these ballots? And I got to tell you, I'm not a computer scientist, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a statistician, and again, I'm not a computer scientist or a programmer. I'm not a Luddite either, but I way beyond me, way beyond me. I'm just not at that level. I'm more the Joe Voter level. But when they were trying to develop the program just to scan the ballots, I had done one election, in fact, using just an off-the-shelf scanner and program. I'm sure it was proprietary, and I had one in the can before Mitch joined us, and he said, well, why don't we even do that, the scanning of the ballots, using open source software? And he developed that for us. But when the epiphany came, when Mitch couldn't get our Fujitsu scanner, it was a driver issue. And he contacted Fujitsu, and was it the programmer? I want to say his name was, go ahead, do you remember?
Well, we contacted Fujitsu, who couldn't care less, and I'm embarrassed to say I'm not going to be able to remember his name just at the moment.
I want to say Noah?
Noah.
Something else.
Noah something else. I apologize, Noah.
Yeah.
But this is typical of the open source community. He was someone who had developed the Fujitsu drivers for the protocol that's used for scanning in the Linux operating system. And what, did he get back to us within 6 hours?
Yeah. And I thought, and I don't believe he was in the United States, was he?
Well, he was on the East Coast. That's
Was he
still
on the
United
East?
States.
Oh, it is? To some. I was thinking he was in Canada. Anyway, when someone of that experience and knowledge would respond to our project so promptly because they thought it was important, bing, the light comes on. This is bigger than Humboldt County. And I was even impressed with the fact that Mitch knew how to get a hold of somebody. But what I really want to say here is that we are lucky to live in California right now, where we have a Secretary of State who is very receptive to anything that's going to make elections more transparent and understandable and trustworthy and bring integrity to our election system in California. I learned just last week that there are other states that, in California, first of all, to be a certified system in California, the system has to undergo some pretty serious testing. But before it can even qualify for that, it has to be tested at the federal level, which is a very expensive process. So there are a half a dozen or so systems that are in use in California. All of them have been so tested. So to present anything new is an expensive process, to say the least. But we're so lucky in California to have those processes and to expect that testing of the voting equipment that we use, and to expect our registrars of voters and elections officials to comply with the conditions and the procedures that the Secretary of State has drawn up to mitigate anything that she saw as a possible threat to the security or the integrity of an election. So whether or not you like the system in your county, be glad that you don't live, for example, in the state of Oklahoma, where I understand it's y'all come. There is no requirement for federal certification, much less any state or local certification. It's all on the local election official. So while to some election officials in California these regulations and procedures and certifications are horribly burdensome, I think we as voters, I consider myself a voter too, not just a registrar of voters, we can have a different level of confidence than the voter might have in any other state. I think Deborah Bowen's done a great job. But sort of by way of introducing my friend Mitch, I have not in my life found somebody that is as focused and brilliant as Mitch Trachtenberg, and yet can communicate with me on a level that I can understand. And I've seen him communicate with others on much more sophisticated levels than that. But he's able to dummy down for me, and I appreciate that very much, Mitch. I think, though, he doesn't do that for me. He sees the problem, that it's not the election official, it's not the statistician, it's not the computer scientist that we want to look at this, look at our election and verify, it's the guy that works in the mill. It's the guy that works down at Home Depot or in the shoe store or whatever. We want every citizen, every voter in Humboldt County to be able to examine what we have done. That's kind of a gutsy move on my part when you realize that, damn, if there's a mistake in there, I'm mincemeat. So we like to review it a little bit first and make sure there are none. But I wouldn't have that opportunity if it wasn't for Mitch and his software. Another thing, advantage to a procedure like ours is that, in fact, in the November election, there were 2 instances where there were fairly close races. 14 votes.
Which year?
This last election, November 2nd, 2010. One race for a small, the Southern Humboldt Community Healthcare District. It was an elect 3 contest, and the 4th person had 14 less votes than the 3rd person. And I can understand her concern, as I'm sure you can. Is everything right? Is everything okay? And it was not my intent to say, ask Mitch and see if he'll count them for you. It was my intent to say, get a hold of Mitch Trachtenberg, look at the images of the ballots for your race, and count them yourself. But it was through this project that 2 races, in fact, in Humboldt County, at least 2, and Mitch might know of others. I don't know if there were in this time. The availability of those ballots made it possible for the candidates to look at it and decide, no, it's not close enough that I should ask for a recount. So that in little old Humboldt County, that probably saved each of those candidates at least a few $1,000s. And you can imagine in larger jurisdictions what a campaign might have to spend to actually have the registrar of voters conduct a recount of the ballots. But with that, I'd like to have, I want to see Mitch's demonstration one more time.
Can I just add one or just 2 things? I was first heard about your county and what was going on when in 2008, due to some things Mitch will describe, there was Diebold had not counted 297. There were 297, is it, or something like
197.
that. 197 votes that had been dropped. A precinct had been dropped, and I mean, this is a very serious thing. The thing that bothered me even more was Diebold's response, which was not, oh my goodness, something happened. Let's see what we can find out about this. Now that would be, no, it was to summarily cut off business relations with Humboldt County, ask for all of the machines to be returned, please, in good condition, and they also took the voter registration software or something like that. And so what I say, and I've seen it, as Ohio, the president of Diebold had also in 2004 promised to give Ohio to President Bush and various other things. I say to myself, are these the people, are these the quality of people I want counting my votes? And so I just want to really reflect the kind, sort of humble approach that you have about really wanting to serve the public. And I was so gratified, Carolyn, to hear about the tremendous amount of appreciation that you've gotten for this kind of caring approach, you and Mitch, from your people in your county. And I would hope that that would nourish and inspire other registrars to take something like this on and have more joy in their own work. So anyway, with that, let's go on, Rich.
I'll be moving over to the computers in a second, but before I leave the microphone, I was joking earlier, this is a bit of a mutual admiration society, and you'll have to forgive me. But Carolyn Crnich is just a complete breath of fresh air. She's what an elected official is supposed to be. She wants to assist the people in her community to accomplish what they want, to make sure that things happen that the people in the community want to happen. And I don't know that Carolyn knows this. I actually approached people in the elections office probably when I first moved to Humboldt, which was about 15 years ago. And, you know, I was blown off. And I've come to expect that, actually, from many people in elected office. And I was visiting Carolyn on a completely, we'd never met before, but we had a mutual friend who had suggested that we talk. And I was kind of taken aback to find an election official who was as concerned about election integrity as I was, and it was just enormously refreshing. I'd also like to just say a word about Kevin Collins, who I'm hoping will be here before too much longer. As Carolyn mentioned, he's a commercial fisherman, and it's a really wonderful situation where we have people from the community stepping forward and volunteering their services to try to make democracy work, to move democracy a bit forward. And Kevin Collins and Tom Pinto and others are just an excellent example of that. And one of the things that's really satisfying about working with this project is it's completely nonpartisan. I mean, I'm not even entirely sure what party various members of the project belong to, if any. So with that, I'll walk away from the mic.
As Mitch moves to his computer, let me just say one more little thing about Kevin. I refer to him as a commercial fisherman, but he is an honors graduate of Cal Berkeley. I believe his degree is in philosophy, if I'm not mistaken. So he's probably not the run-of-the-mill commercial fisherman, but he does have a great communication.